Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a full review and 3 tutorials using the new SydneyGrace palette. This is called the Be Mine palette. This is their Valentine's Day palette. And this is already available now on their website. SydneyGrace was kind enough to send this to me in PR. So excited, so grateful, and I couldn't wait to dive in and play with it. This palette retails for $52, and I will link it in the description box down below. But SydneyGrace always has amazing pigments. When I saw this palette, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to create a few looks with it and share it with you guys. And I also had that thought of what Mel would do and what looks Mel would create with such a beautiful palette. And Mel had such an amazing relationship with SydneyGrace, and as we all know, she created the Tiny Marvels palette with SydneyGrace. And so when I opened the palette, I kept looking at it and thinking what Mel would have done and like what looks she would have done and how beautiful they would have been. And it was just a kind of a special moment that I had of just a beautiful memory. A lot of memories kind of came rushing over me when I opened it. It just made me think of her. Mel was so talented and always created such gorgeous eyeshadow looks. Like, in my opinion, she created some of the best looks on YouTube. And so I kept looking at it thinking, what looks would Mel create and how beautiful would they be? And so anyways, I just kind of had a special moment with it when I opened it, but it has 15 beautiful shades, and SydneyGrace has amazing pigment. I mean, in my opinion, they're one of the best qualities. You got a lot of pigment, but they blend so beautifully together. And the other thing that I love about SydneyGrace is that they always give you a light and dark palette. So this is actually the light palette of the Be Mine version, but they also created a dark version of this palette. And what that means is if they're the same colors, they just have a darker depth to them. And I love that they do that. I don't know that they always get the credit that they deserve for it. I love that they accommodate all complexions. So shout out to them for doing that. It's incredible. Yeah, because it's double the work. It's double the work to do something like that. So I think they deserve that credit. And I'm so excited to play with this palette. We're going to dive right into the 3 eyeshadow looks that I created using the palette. And then we will get into swatches, and I will swatch this palette and also compare it to other palettes that I have in my collection. And then I will jump into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. Let's start playing with this new palette from SydneyGrace. I'm so excited. This whole row right here is really like kind of pink and pretty. And then you kind of have more of a neutral row here. You have a nice combination with warm and cool tones. And then down here, you just have really beautiful shimmer shades, and then you got a black. Let's first go into this shade and see what it looks like as a base. I'm just gonna kind of start with that shade and kind of put it here in the crease. SydneyGrace always has such amazing pigments. I mean, that color is light in the pan, but man, does it build. This color is so pretty, and it's a nice little base, blends out beautifully. Let's go into this shade right here. By the way, I'm using the Wayne Goss number 20 brush, and I'm just gonna kind of focus that right on the actual bone, kind of right there in that crease, just to add that dimension. Now I'm going to take a flatter brush. This is actually the Unit 202 that I got in my Beautylish box. And I'm going to go into this shade right here. And I'm going to place that here on the outer corner. I haven't put on any concealer yet, so I'll kind of clean up this line once I put some concealer on. Let's move on to Shimmer Shadow. I'm going to grab the Smith 253 brush, and I'm going to go into the shade Flirty right here. We're going to put this on dry first. Look at that pigment. Now I'm going to use the shade Darling to kind of blend that shimmer shade into the center of the lid. Now I'm going to take the BK Beauty 204 brush. It's like a smudge brush. And I'm going to go into the shade Pucker Up. And I'm just going to start kind of tapping this at the base. And then I'm going to bring what's left on the brush kind of right here in the crease, kind of creating some dimension. Then I'm going to go back into Darling, and I'm going to use Darling to kind of blend that out. Okay, so I went ahead and put on a little bit of concealer. Let's start working on the lower lash line and kind of pull all of this together. So I'm going to go back into Soulmates, that light pink, and I'm going to bring that here on the lower lash line. This color has way more pigment than you're thinking it does. Then I'm going to go into Darling with a flat-tipped brush and kind of focus that right at the base of my lash. I'm going to take the shade Pucker Up, and I'm going to focus that right here on this outer corner. And I'm going to do that on the upper and the lower. Trying to add a little bit of depth. So I took that brush right here using my lash line as kind of the anchor and the guide, and I just kind of flick it and it creates just a soft powder wing. I'm gonna go ahead and throw on some lashes and I will be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I just went ahead and threw on a lash and a tiny bit of mascara because I am just gonna be wiping this off, but this is the final look for look number 1, and absolutely no problems with the shadows that I used thus far. Just so easy, so beautiful, and typical SydneyGrace. It truly is. So that's it for look number 1. Let's go ahead and jump into look number 2. Let's jump into look number 2. So I definitely want to play with like these tones right here. I want to use this shimmer and maybe kind of using the gold to kind of pull it all together. But with both of these eyeshadow colors, shimmer shades, I would want to use this top row. So I might incorporate maybe this shade with one of the tones, but you know, look number 2 and number 3 might look kind of similar, maybe just different tones. I'm going to first start with this transition shade right here. It looks lighter in the pan, but we are talking about SydneyGrace, and they have fantastic shadows. So as you can see, that's got great pigment, great tone, and it's blending beautifully. I'm also going to bring that shade on the lid. I'm going to take the Smith 253 and let's just go straight into the shade and see what it looks like. It's very pigmented, and so I kind of have a feeling that this is going to be one of those shadows that kind of goes a really long way. See how far it's spreading? Oh, and I just touched my face with my brush. Oh, I hate it when that happens. This is the reason why I don't like doing my face makeup first. It's one of those shadows that really makes a mess. I am making a mess. Okay. I only have foundation on, and that I can fix, so we're good. But this one is a little bit hard to use just because it's so pigmented that like it goes forever and ever and ever. So it's a little bit hard to use. I'm just going to kind of buff out these edges. I'm going to go into that transition shade, which is all mine. If you open up that palette and you decide you're going to use that shade, Crush on You, do not do your face makeup first. Do your eye makeup because that shade is kind of tricky to work with because it's so pigmented. So what I mean by that is, I mean, I could go forever and ever and ever and ever and ever with this shade. See what I'm saying? Like it just goes. And it goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, right? So it's got so much to the actual shadow. It's got so much pigment that you can lose kind of control of it quite fast if you're not careful with it. So now I'm going to go into Love Me. And I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of that Crushed on You. Like I dipped the smallest, like just a few hairs of the brush. And I'm just going to softly kind of work that into the crease. So I went ahead and threw on some concealer. Let's move on to the lower lash line. And then I'm going to kind of pull it all together and bring all these tones together. So I'm going to go into All Mine, and I'm going to bring that right on the lower lash line. And I'm going to kind of use that shade to soften up that straight edge right here. Okay, now I'm going to go into Love Me, and I'm just going to kind of deepen it up. So I'm going to take that smudge brush from BK Beauty. This is the 204, and I'm going to go into Romance, and I'm going to focus that right there on the upper and lower lash line. I'm going to go into the shade Smooch, which is that very first shade. I'm going to put it right there in the center just to make that pop. I love me a center eyelid pop right there. So pretty, right? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and throw on the other lash, and I'll be right back. So I went ahead and threw on a lash. It's half on because I am going to be wiping both of these eye looks off for the third look. So it's kind of hanging on by thread, and I thought, why fix it? Why sit there and put more glue on it when I got to take it off anyway, right? So this is it, and this is a very beautiful, beautiful eye look. And this palette has a lot of, it has a lot going on, a lot of different things going on. And even though I would not think that this would be a Valentine's Day type of look, it is really pretty. And it is in the palette, and I think it turned out really pretty. And I didn't have any issues other than the shimmer shade being a lot. Like you only need the smallest amount because it will go everywhere. So just be careful with it. But other than that, just beautiful. So that's it for look number 2. Let's go ahead and jump into look number 3, which will be the final look. So I washed off both of those eye makeup looks. My brows are looking a little crazy, but who cares? We're going to move on to the third and final look. And I just can't wait. I'm so excited to play with this beautiful green. It's kind of like an emerald green. It's like a mix between emerald and olive. It's kind of an in-between. It's super pretty. Oh, look at that shade. Probably use the same matte shades that I used in the second look. So I'm going to first go into All Mine, and I'm going to basically put that all over in the crease. And then I'm going to go into Love Me, and I'm going to bring that right at the base of that crease. For this look, I'm thinking about bringing a little bit of Darling into it, which is kind of that mauve shade. So I'm going to grab Darling, and I'm going to bring that right over top of that color, just to have a little bit of that warmth to it. Then I'm going to go back into Love Me, and I'm going to put Love Me right over top. But bringing that into it, it's really pretty. So I'm going to take my Smith 253 brush, and I'm going to go into Eye Candy. Now I'm going to go into Baby Cakes, which is that really pretty gold. And I'm going to put it right over top of that emerald green. Now I'm going to go into All Mine, and I'm going to kind of blend those two together. But I got a little bit heavy-handed with the emerald green right here on the inner corner, so I had to kind of wipe it off, which I'll fix that with concealer once I put concealer on. Now I'm going to take a pencil brush, and I'm going to go into the shade Romance, which is that dark color on the end. And I'm going to focus that right here on the outer corner, like right at the base of that bone, just to give some of the dimension out here. And I think I dragged that green a little bit too far. Like, I don't know if I want to take that green off on that outer corner or just leave it. I just don't know what to do. I went ahead and threw on some concealer. So let's go into the shade All Mine. I am going to place that right here on the lower lash line. And then I'm going to go into Love Me, and I'm going to do the same thing with Love Me, and I'm going to bring it right close to the lashes. My dogs are getting a little restless. I need to add some depth on the outer corner. So I'm going to take the flat tipped brush, and I'm going to go into Romance, that dark shade. I'm going to use my lower lash line as the guide, and I'm going to like blink, and then I'm going to fill that in and just kind of create a little bit of soft dimension. I'm going to take the flat definer from Sonia G, and I'm going to go into Smooch, which is the first shade in the palette, and I'm going to bring that like right here on the inner corner. I think I'm also going to bring that on the brow bone. Just a tiny bit. That shade is kind of similar to one of the shades in Mel's palette, the Tiny Marvels palette. Which, of course, I will swatch this palette next to that palette, but it's really pretty. Now, the real chore is going to begin trying to get the other eye to match, because the worst part about doing eye makeup on camera like this is doing one eye at a time and then going off camera and then having to try to match the eyes and kind of make them look the same. It's not always easy. It's actually quite difficult. When I'm not filming, of course, I do both of the eyes together. All right, I'm gonna go off camera, do the other eye, throw some lashes on, finish the rest of my makeup, and I will be right back. Okay, so I am back. This is the final look. I went ahead and finished the other eye, finished the rest of my makeup. This is it for look number 3. And yes, I did struggle trying to match the other side. It's always a struggle when you do one eye on camera and then you go off camera to do another, and just trying to get the placements right, and you know how many times you dipped into one shade, so sometimes it never matches. They are twins but not identical, and that's the way I like it. So that's it for look number 3. Let's go ahead and jump into the swatches of this beautiful palette, and I will also do a few comparisons of other palettes that I find that might be similar to this color story, and then I will jump into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. Now that we've made it through those swatches, I do hope that those were helpful for you. Let me go ahead and get into my final thoughts. My only critique on this palette, like the actual color story doesn't scream Valentine's Day to me. You've got this pink row and this purple shade, but the rest are just really not that Valentine's Day, in my opinion. I don't know. And here's the thing. We all have our own interpretation of what that should be or what color story it should be. But on the flip side of that, that means that you can wear it pretty much all year, you know, like these are all year round shades. But all in all, it's a gorgeous palette. Shadows blend beautifully. Didn't have any issues with them. So even though it doesn't inspire me to use for Valentine's Day, I think it's a beautiful palette. I feel like all of the shadows blended beautifully. I don't have anything negative to say as far as just the overall quality, formula, everything there. It was just perfect. I didn't find a ton of palettes with this kind of color combination, but what was really interesting is the palette that I found that was closest to this palette was the Enduring Love palette from SydneyGrace. There are some similarities when it comes to this color story. It's very similar. So I kind of feel like if you have the Enduring Love palette, you probably do not need the Be Mine palette. I mean, you can see them sitting right here side by side. They look very similar. That's just my opinion. It doesn't really change the overall quality of the palette, how the palette performs and all of that. The palette's fantastic. But it's just a little confusing. But if you have the Enduring Love palette and the Tiny Marvels palette, I don't really think you need this new one because I think there's enough. It's almost like if the Enduring Love palette doesn't have those shades, you might find it in the Tiny Marvels palettes. But here's the thing though, that's just me on a personal level. And if you love this color story, you'll love this palette because the formula is phenomenal. It just is. They always just bring it with the formula. So those are my overall thoughts. Sound out down below in the comment section. Let us know. Have you guys picked up this new palette from SydneyGrace? If you have, share with us in the comment section down below your experience. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in today's video. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys all in my next video. Love you. Bye.